So, warmly welcome to the launch of the Nordic Toolbox for a just green transition. My name is Lisa Pelling and I am the head of the think tank Arena Idén. I've been given the big honor to take you through this session and to moderate this event. I personally, I think most of you who follow this event, are very deeply engaged in climate issues. Recently made 200 interviews with people living in socioeconomically stressed rural areas. And my impression is that people are worried about climate change and aware about climate change everywhere. What people need are tools, and these tools need to be tools for a just and green transition. So today we'll explore the Nordic Toolbox for a just green transition and how this toolbox can help policymakers across the Nordic region to drive a green transition that is not only sustainable, but also just and inclusive. Nordic Region, who have been working with this toolbox and are hosting this event, is a leading research institution, and they have spent 4 years of research on behalf of the Nordic Council of Ministers to develop this toolbox. And the goal, as I said, is to provide policymakers with practical tools to ensure that no one is left behind during this transition. The toolbox will present tools, but also concrete examples, a checklist. It will highlight 6 priority areas that need some extra attention, and it offers 4 policy memos for key social groups. The toolbox looks in particular at older adults, at young people, at people with disabilities, and at people who are at risk of unemployment. This event is being recorded and it will be available afterwards, so please do not hesitate to share it with friends, colleagues, or why not, a policy maker that you think should see this and use the toolbox. For the launch, we have only 1 hour at hand, so we will move forward quite quickly, but we want you to engage with us. We want this session to be interactive. So throughout the webinar, you'll have the chance to participate in a few polls, and there will be time to take questions from the audience. You who are following this live are the main characters of this launch. So please do not hesitate to write any comments, questions, perspective that you would like to share with the other participants in the chat. I have Louise Ögland, who is a communications advisor at Nordic Region, who will help me with these particular features. So let's start with a quick poll to get a sense of how you stand in one of the most important issues here. Please, Louise, launch the first poll. So you should be able to see the polls on your screens and also to participate. I can see you are doing this now. Very good. So we have a lot of people joining us today, and we know that there's been a great interest. There's a lot of people who will be watching this as well afterwards. And as I said, don't hesitate to share this launch and to share the toolbox. Louise, let me know when you think the poll is ready.
Yeah, I can see we have a lot of answers coming in, so I think we should be ready to share the results.
Has the focus on justice and the green transition changed within your organization in the past year? I know those of you who are participating represent a wide variety of different civil society organizations, trade unions, political and climate activists from across the Nordic region. So what does the poll say, Louise?
Well, the focus on justice in the green transition has gone up for 48%, but same focus is close second on 46%. And we also let people share some comments on the challenges they face in their work. And they pose questions like, what do we mean by just, micromobility, and explaining the urgency of planning for a just green transition. So thank you so much for your contribution.
Thank you so much, Lisa. We'll move forward in the program. We have a number of very knowledgeable and interesting speakers who are joining us today. First, we will have Åsa Persson, who is representing the Swedish Climate Policy Council and the Stockholm Environment Institute. She will shortly give a keynote speech. After that, we will have a very thorough presentation of the toolbox itself, and then we will have a panel discussion with some leading experts and representatives of different groups that are of particular importance to the toolbox. But now let's begin with Åsa Persson to frame the challenge of ensuring a just green transition. Åsa, please come and join me here. Åsa, as I said, is a Deputy Director of the Stockholm Environment Institute, member of the Swedish Climate Policy Council, and you will help us understand why this toolbox is so badly needed. Welcome, Åsa.
Thank you very much, Lisa and Nordic Region for inviting me today, and big congratulations on launching this toolbox. I think it's a really useful resource that for sure the Climate Policy Council here in Sweden will look at, and I hope many other users, policymakers, and of course politicians throughout the Nordic region. So I was invited to set the context a bit and share a few observations with you. And I think it's very important to start off with the observation that the climate transition is happening. It's ongoing. There is lots of evidence that we are making progress. So that's a very basic starting point for us. However, we also need to do a reality check where we are at this point in time. And there is, of course, quite a lot of uncertainty. If we look at the mathematics of the global climate transition, and we're heading into a climate COP, as you know, next week in Baku, we know that countries together need to reduce emissions by 2030 with 43% compared with 2019 levels. What they have put on the table so far only amounts to some 3%. So we have a huge emission gap already now. What will happen in Baku is that we will kick off the process to develop the next generation of NDCs, or national climate plans, with a view to 2035. And then we need to reduce emissions even more, up to 57%, in order to be in line with the Paris Agreement target of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees. So I think this is a challenge, of course. We have a credibility issue here. Can we really raise ambition looking forward? Well, we still have this, we're not really meeting the targets currently. Looking at the geopolitical situation, of course, we have the US election going on today. And we know also some countries, for example, the BRICS countries, Russia, India, China, and now also Saudi Arabia, Iran, are mobilizing more. Maybe will resist to some extent the phase out of fossil fuels. We have some business backlash, some uncertainty, far from all green industries, but some early mover companies are struggling. And that we had this fear of kind of voter backlash, or at the level of citizens and consumers, are they less supportive of the climate transition now? On that latter point, I think we have more mixed evidence now. For example, in the European election, we saw that many voters still think that the EU has an important task in developing ambitious climate policy. But of course, a key challenge here is also to get that buy-in from the general public so we can progress faster. And we know the rest of the world is looking to the Nordic region. If we cannot make it here with the high level of innovation we have, the very dynamic industry and private sector, and the big established welfare states, where in the world can we succeed? So that's why it's so important to try and use all our knowledge and resources to really make the transition just. So again, the toolbox is a very welcome resource. In the Climate Policy Council, we have started looking also more at this aspect of just transition and social acceptability of climate policy. So we're really happy to see this development of good practice guidelines and tools. So I just want to make a few quick points, and I think in terms of how we should view just transition. I think one important point is that we now tend to look very much at how will climate mitigation policy impact people. For example, carbon prices on transport. However, let's not forget about also understanding how climate impacts will affect the general public. Who will suffer most from flooding, heat waves, etc. We also need to look at the benefits of climate policy. Who are really benefiting from these huge public investments that we are making? So the concept of just needs to be broad. I'm also, secondly, really happy to see in this toolbox that you don't look only at distributive justice. How do you share costs and benefits, but also procedural justice and recognitional justice. So really, who gets to be part of this process of developing and implementing climate policy? Who gets to be heard? And we know from research that these aspects are often as important or even more important actually than the distribution of costs and benefits. Thirdly, and this is an important observation from the research seminar we had here in Sweden with leading researchers on social acceptability. And this was that we need to also have a critical perspective on just transition. Of course, we need to be practical also, for example, by providing this toolbox, but also ask ourselves, are we expecting too much from climate policy and the climate transition to be particularly just in view of other policy areas? So are we setting the right expectations in terms of how just it can be? And also in the past, we know that much of environmental policy, we did not particularly seek social acceptance, but people still accepted it. So I would just urge everyone that it's very important to also have that critical perspective. So again, the toolbox is great. I'm hoping that it will not only be applied and used in sort of parallel exercises of, for example, creating a shared vision, but that it will also really influence mainstream politics. This is where we need to see change. And finally, also, I think it's really useful that you have developed this toolbox and you gather all these Nordic experiences so countries can learn from each other. I think we need to see much more of this so that we, in our national politics, we don't have this sense of false uniqueness, but really many other countries are struggling with the same issues and developing solutions that we can try out at home. So with that, thank you very much, and very excited to see the uptake of this toolbox. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Åsa, for setting the stage. I'm so happy that you could take time from your very busy schedule to join us with these important conceptual points. Let's move on to the toolbox itself. I would like to ask Louise Ögland, who I already introduced. She's communications advisor at Nordic Region. Together with Nora Sanchez-Gassen, you're also here. You're a senior research fellow at Nordic Region, and you have been working on developing this toolbox, as I said before, during 4 very intensive years. So there's a lot of work in this toolbox, and hopefully it will be a very valuable tool for the work of all of us. You will walk us through the features of the toolbox, the key findings, and maybe the most important thing, how policymakers can use it effectively. Nora, over to you. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for this nice introduction, and thank you also for these very inspiring words now here at the beginning. My name is Nora Sanchez-Gassen. I work as a senior research fellow here at Nordic Region.
Louise Ögland, communications advisor.
And we are very pleased to present the toolbox to you that we're launching here today, the Nordic Toolbox for a Just Green Transition. It's a toolbox that we have developed with the aim to provide some support for policymakers in the Nordic region to design policies that not only help us reach our climate goals, as Åsa said, that's the main priority, of course, but we also hope we can help and contribute to policies that are fair, just, and inclusive. Louise, can you tell us a bit more about the content of the
Yes.
toolbox?
I will share my screen. I don't know if you have had the chance to explore it yet, but this is the landing page and the first page of the toolbox. And it's divided into 6 sections, as you can see, that helps you to navigate in a user-friendly manner. First, we have an introduction. What is this toolbox? We have some background and definition, what we mean by just, background of the term, just green transition. Then we zoom in on the main parts of this toolbox, so the 6 priority areas for just green transition. This is core themes that stood out in our research that needs extra attention. So it's challenges and also tools and examples on how to tackle them. In the policy memos, we get to hear voices and views from people in the Nordics, their expectations, worries, and hopes for the green transition. In this section, you can get an overview of climate goals and emissions in the Nordics to learn more. And we end up with a checklist for policymakers that combines all the insights and materials of the toolbox in clear, actionable steps. So essentially, this is a compendium of Nordic insights on how to ensure justice in the green transition. Let's dive in.
Yes, let's look in. Louise has just given you a quick overview of the different parts of the toolbox, what you can find here. Let's dive into one of the areas that is one of the main ones in this toolbox, our 6 priority areas for a just green transition. So as Lisa told you, we have been doing this project for 4 years, and in this time we have done a few focus group discussions, but also a range of interviews with different stakeholders. This included civil society organizations, labor union representatives from the Nordic countries, but also, for example, youth representatives for older people, and more. And in our discussions with these different stakeholder groups, we focused on the just green transition. We discussed with them, what does it mean, a just green transition in the Nordic region? And what do we have to focus on? What should we do to make sure that the green transition will be just? These are key topics that we discussed with these various stakeholders. And then based on these discussions and interviews, we identified 6 areas that emerged as being particularly relevant for a just green transition in the Nordics. And these are the 6 areas you can see there on the right-hand side. More precisely, these areas deal on the one hand with communication, the goal to be more inspiring, perhaps even visionary, positive in the green transition, how we communicate it to bring people on board. A second priority area deals with engaging people. This was a strong theme that came out in our interviews, that we have to try to be better and be inclusive, offer more opportunities for people, for stakeholders, for civil society and the labor unions to bring in their knowledge and their ideas. We also have a third area that looks at the impacts of green transition policies. Here there was a strong urge that we have to be better in understanding the social impacts of policies, the regional impacts of policies, and also support the most vulnerable groups in our societies in the process. We have another policy area, a priority area, that looks into the spatial consequences of the green transition, because everything happens in a space and green transition policies affect some regions more than others. So it's important to have this place-based approach in the green transition. We also talk about the importance of upskilling and reskilling in the green transition to make sure that we have workers with the right skills equipped to take the green jobs that emerge now. And finally, we have one section dealing with consumption. And here the message is that we have to make it easier, more affordable and accessible to choose green and have sustainable lifestyles. We can't go into all of these 6 areas in detail now, but we thought we will show you at least one of them so you get an idea of the kinds of materials you can find there, and perhaps it can give you some idea on how you can use it in your own work. So each of the 6 priority areas is structured in exactly the same way. We always start with a brief introduction to tell you what this topic, what this theme is about, and we have some key messages defined for you to give you sort of a very brief overview what we're aiming at. If you have a bit of more time and you can take in a bit more content, when you scroll down on every page, you will then see that we have defined some key challenges. Again, these emerge from our interviews, from our discussions with stakeholders. These are challenges that have highlighted to us some areas where we might become better, where perhaps things are going not as well as they could, so some things to focus on. But then we don't want to stay there. We don't just want to criticize. We want to be proactive and go forward. So we have put together also always a list for you with some key pointers, some key suggestions on what could be done to become even better in this area. So here, for example, in this particular theme on engaging people, we make suggestions of what could be done to offer more opportunities for collaboration and cooperation. This is material we have not developed on our own. Instead, we have browsed the literature, we've browsed the academic literature, we looked at Nordic research institutes such as the Stockholm Environment Institute that also represents. We've looked at what the OECD has published, the European Commission, etc. We've tried to really pull together the knowledge that is available on the green transition, suggestions on how we can make it more just, and suggestions that really apply to our priority areas. So this is sort of a condensed version of the knowledge we have tried to gather for you. As you can see, this is very short. We try to keep it very brief for you, but if you want to dig deeper, every priority area has a long list of references in the end. There is a lot of material available for you. If you want to know more, if you really want to understand the area and get into the details, you will find resources there that you can use that we have found very valuable in our work. Then for each priority area on the second page, we try to become a bit more practical. We thought, let's not stay too much in the literature. Let's try to give you some more hands-on and concrete input. In our research, we've come across a lot of examples that are inspiring, interesting, that are happening, because as Åsa said, the green transition is happening. There's a lot of things going on in the Nordics, in Europe and beyond. And we have tried to put together some examples for each priority area that we thought were interesting, inspiring, and perhaps something we can learn from, or at least see if some of these ideas that were used there could apply also here in the Nordic countries. And then each section also ends, you will see, with several tools. Tools, these are publications or guidelines that we've come across in our work that are very concrete, hands-on, often step-by-step instructions on how to work in our priority areas. So here in this particular case, for example, we have come across publications that give step-by-step instructions on how to prepare a climate assembly if you want to involve people, or concrete ideas and instructions on how to involve youth or children in the green transition, or concrete ideas, things to think about when you want to make your meetings inclusive and accessible to everyone. So whenever we found these very, very concrete publications that can really help in the day-to-day work, we put them there for you in this section on tools. So to sum up, this is what you can find in all 6 priority areas. We define some of the challenges, we try to point to some solutions, some steps forward, and we try to equip you with references, with examples, and with tools to help you in your day-to-day work. And I should say that all of these priority areas, they were designed in such a way that they're hopefully useful for you no matter where you work in the Nordic region, but also no matter where you work in which topic area. We've tried to find some of the cross-cutting themes that could be relevant no matter if you work in infrastructure or with consumption-based topics or in the world of work or others. We hope that at least some of these points will be relevant for all of you no matter what your concrete topic area is. But there's more, right, Louise?
There's more. We also want to highlight the 4 policy memos in the toolbox. So it's 4 policy memos per 4 social groups at risk of being left behind in the green transition. We have young people, older adults, people with disabilities, and workers in carbon-heavy industries. So let's dive into young people policy memo. They're all structured in the same way, a summary of the memo, and then we list some key insights. And this gives you a quick overview. But if you want to get the full picture, you can also click on the key insights. So for example, if this catches your interest, 74% of young people in the Nordics worry. And this is more than other groups in the Nordic region. So then you can learn more, you get a quote, you get some data, and you can easily navigate back to the top. And what is young people's perception of justice? Learn more. And if you just want to read the memo from start to bottom, you scroll down, and here you'll also find the sources behind all the memos. It's based on literature review and the big Nordic survey that we conducted in this project. And we've also have had focus group discussions. So for all of these memos, you can also find suggestions from the groups. So suggestions from young people for a just green transition. And this is direct messages from the affected groups. What do they think need to be done? And at the end, we also have a video with a representative from each group with a message. So our hope is that these memos will serve as guidance when crafting policies that engage or affect these social groups. And let's have a look at the checklist section as well. In this section, we collect all the material and insights from the toolbox in a step-by-step manner, making it easy for you to see that you have covered all essential areas. And if you want to explore something further, you can also click on the sections. So that was that. Thank you.
Yes, so we hope that in those couple of minutes, we could at least give you an overview of the material you can find there in the toolbox. We hope we could give you some idea on how this might be useful or applicable in your own work. We do encourage you to have a look, especially in the priority areas and the policy memos. Have a look, see how you can use that material, if it can give you some ideas for your work going forward. We also encourage you to be in touch with us if you have feedback, comments or questions. Let us know, we'd be really happy to hear from you. And overall, yeah, we do hope that our toolbox helps us in the green transition to not only create policies that help us achieve the climate goals, but also that make sure that these policies are just, fair and inclusive. And with that, we thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat and I'll pass it on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nora and Louise, for this short but very spicy presentation of this toolbox. I'm afraid, though, that we're losing our audience. I think people will start scrolling on their screens now and discovering this. Wait a few more minutes so that you can participate in the launch as well. Louise will now have a look at the chat. This direction, I think, to see what kind of reflections and perspectives you are bringing up as an audience. But I'd like to ask a question to you, Nora. Åsa reminded us that both climate change and climate mitigation efforts will affect different people differently. So you'd have some people who stand a lot to gain from mitigation policies, very concrete policies, except for us, all gaining in the long run, of course. And some people will be more severely affected by climate change itself than other people. You've chosen to focus on 4 groups. Why these groups? Why young people, older adults, and people with disabilities, and people working in particular sectors, if I understood it correctly? It's in energy intensive or fossil dependent sectors. Why these 4?
Yeah, that's a good question, Lisa. Thank you. So the Nordic Council of Ministers has had a focus on those 4 groups for the last couple of years, because they have identified these groups as some of them that might be particularly affected by climate change, but also by the green transition. And some of these groups are perhaps also a bit underrepresented in policy making. So there has been this task given to us to look specifically at these 4 groups, young people and children, older adults, people with disabilities, and workers in carbon-heavy industries, to see how do they feel about the green transition, what do they expect, what are they worried about, and to build up a bit more knowledge in these areas. So this has been the focus in these policy memos. However, in the toolbox as a whole, also when it comes to the priorities, we did try to take a broader view and look at sort of the societal development as a whole, and to try to also capture a bit of a broader perspective.
Thank you so much, because I suppose it's very difficult when you'd have the rural-urban divide and you will have differences in capabilities of coping with climate change and with climate transition, depending on your income and your resources, in terms maybe of your educational level. I'm sure these are things that you would like to discuss as well. Louise, do we have any perspectives now from the chat?
Yes, we do. Thank you so much for being so active in the chat. It's great to see. One question: are we asking too much in terms of this justice aspect? Are we too focused on being socially acceptable?
Yeah, Nora, can we wait for the transition to be socially acceptable? Should we just go ahead and save the planet instead of worrying about justice?
Yeah, I mean, Åsa has already touched upon this, right? I mean, of course, our first priority has to be to meet the climate goals, because if we do not meet the climate goals, that's going to be the greatest injustice of all, because we know that some groups are going to be more affected than others and are really going to bear the brunt of it. So we have to get the green transition done. This is also something that one of our youth representatives actually really stressed, that this has to be our first priority. But of course, we have to, or it's going to be also very important to make sure that we don't just sort of push things through without taking people on board. Things will be better if we can build on the Nordic knowledge we have, on the experiences, on the ideas that we have. There's a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders out there who have a lot to contribute to the green transition when it comes to spatial knowledge, group-specific knowledge, etc. So policies can only better when we kind of base it on a broad societal support, and of course also if we explain things in a good way, and if we also make sure that those who are especially vulnerable, that they get support in the green transition, because we are, after all, as Åsa said, a stable welfare state. It should be possible for us, of all countries, to make sure that we support those groups who might suffer more in the green transition. And we have seen transitions, industrial transitions in the past where this was not done. If I'm thinking of coal mine closures, for example, sometimes these were just pushed through, and we can see the outcome was not necessarily good. So I think we can do better this time. There is some ambition that we can have there.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much, Nora. Any other reflections, Louise, that you want to bring into the discussion now?
Do we have any estimate of the impact if we do it according to this toolbox? If we focus on the justice of the transition, it will take more resources, more time. So do we have any indicators for that?
Will making the green transition just, will it take more time? Will it be more expensive? What's your estimations?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it will take more time. It will also take more effort. I mean, the more people we want to try to bring in, the more inclusive we try to be, the more we try to plan in ahead. Of course, it takes us resources. But I think the end result will be better. And again, if I come back to some historical examples, coal mine closures in England, for example, we see that things can be pushed through, but then often we have consequences later on that we have to deal, and that also cost. So I think in this case, it is really worth it. And I think also, if we do some of the things that we propose in the toolbox, such as thinking through the impacts of our policies, engaging groups and stakeholders to find the best solutions, I think it can create better policies and hopefully even more efficient policies, to be honest.
Great. So anything else, Louise? I personally find it very useful that there are so many inspiring examples. It's so nice to read and to get this feeling that Åsa was also trying to give us, that the transition is happening, and a lot of communities around the Nordic countries, people are doing things that just a few years or even months ago you would think it's not possible, but people are doing. Did you find it difficult to find inspiring examples and cases of green and just transition?
No, actually not. I just wish we would have had even more time to find even more, to be honest. But it was very nice also for us to see, because there are really interesting ideas. There are really interesting experience here in the Nordics, but also, for example, in Europe. There's some examples I've come across from Spain, for example, also Germany, where I come from, where a lot of things have been tested. And we also have a lot of examples that are really, let's say, at small scale, but so interesting. Experiences from Scotland on how to engage children, for example. I mean, really inspiring ideas that have been developed by organizations that I think really need to be lifted, so we can learn from this and do the same things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. So get inspired, but keep inspiring as well, because this is not the end stage of this toolbox. This is just the launch of it. So this will be used, and you will be able to feed in new examples and new resources as the toolbox is being used. So don't hesitate to get in touch. Now we should move on to another poll, I think, to get a sense of already judging from, thank you, Nora, sorry, by the way, to get a sense of what features of the toolbox you think will be most useful. Please participate in the poll. You can see it on your screens now. Will it be priority areas? Will it be the policy memos? Will it be the checklist? Or will it be the content that is concerned with the concrete climate emission and goals? So what do you think? I think a lot of people have discovered the checklists and the priority areas as well to be focused. And there's quite an even distribution. Yeah, and a lot of people like the policy memos as well. I think it's a good good feedback for you who have worked with this toolbox, that the parts are equally interesting, just as you probably thought when you decided to include all of them. I do not want to think of how many things that you have had to leave out when you worked on this toolbox for 4 years. So now let's bring some stuff in again and let's use this toolbox. But before we look further on the page, please stay with me and stay with a number of experts that we have invited to a panel discussion. So we have invited panelists who are each bringing a unique perspective on how to ensure a just green transition in the Nordic region. They're here to share some insights on the risks and on the opportunities in the green transition and how the toolbox can support this green transition. So we have joining us from Reykjavik, Egert Benedikt Gudmundsson, who is the leader of sustainable development in the Prime Minister's office in Iceland. So really a leading expert on the sustainable development and climate transition in Iceland. We have with us Heta Elena Heiskanen, who is a senior specialist in the Ministry of the Environment in Finland and also the Secretary General of the Climate Change panel. So I suppose you're Åsa's colleague in Finland. We have also joined by Johan Hall, who is an investigator at the Swedish Trade Union Confederation LO with a special focus on climate, environment and energy issues. Welcome also, Johan. And we had hoped to be joined by Ari Sigurdarsson, who is Norway's United Nations Youth Delegate on Sustainable Development. Unfortunately, Ari has fallen ill, but we are very happy to welcome instead Petra Karjalainen, who is the co-chair of the Finnish Agenda 2030 Youth Group. Thank you so much, Petra, for joining us on this extremely short notice. We have only 10 minutes for the panel discussion, so I've asked all the panelists to be short and precise in their comments. Let's start with you, Egert. Given your role working with sustainable development at the very highest level in Iceland, at the Prime Minister's office itself, what lessons can you share with us from Iceland and other Nordic countries about balancing economic growth with social and environmental justice, all these goals being part of the sustainable development goals? Is it possible to have economic growth and a sound climate policy at the same time? What's your perspective? Egert, I think you're muted.
Yeah, somebody
Now I can
muted
hear
me.
you clearly.
Our focus is basically based on our view that in order to balance the three pillars of sustainable development, the economic, the environmental, and the societal, you need basically a very broad cooperation among all the stakeholders. And that's why we have created this platform that I lead here, Sustainable Iceland. And part of that is the Sustainability Council, which is our very big advisory council that we have. It consists of representatives from the youth, from the industry, from the unions, from the academia, from the municipalities, all kinds of NGOs, political parties, and all the ministers of the government are there also. And the Prime Minister is the chairman of the council. And when you have a discussion with such a big variety of representatives coming from different directions, it is so important that you have some firm ground of data and facts that you can help to kind of facilitate the discussion and make it more constructive. So that's why we very much welcome this tool and this toolbox. I think it has the main two benefits of it are, as we've seen, and we've had the luxury of following the development of the tool, is that on one hand it is based on many years of research, so the scientific foundation is very firm, but it's also very user friendly. It's easy to use. It's accessible and inviting, so you can easily go there and find the information that you're looking for, and you can also have references to source material elsewhere. So I think that's going to be very, very useful for our discussion and for our context over here. So I'm very happy to have it launched. Finally, it has been a pleasure to follow the creation of the toolbox.
Thank you so much, Egert. It's great to know that at least in Iceland, as a policy advisor at the very highest level, you are confident that the policymakers that you are trying to advise and influence will find this toolbox very useful. Let's move on to...
I think so. And the next step, of course, and our role in the next step will be to kind of promote it and to get it into use and to share it with all the partners that we're working with.
Yes, that's indeed. Thank you for reminding all of us to share this toolbox as widely as possible and bring it to your civil society organization or bring it to your local policymaker, your local member of parliament, your mayor, and see how you can use this toolbox together. Let's move on to Finland. Heta-Elina Heiskanen, you work at the Ministry of the Environment, and you're also, as we said, the Secretary General for the Climate Change Panel. Can I ask you to reflect in particular on how this toolbox can be useful when it comes to ensuring a just transition that takes into account that there are groups that are more vulnerable both to climate change and to the climate mitigation policies? What's your perspective?
Yes, thank you very much. So actually, our Climate Act in Finland is requiring that we are making an impact assessment of a just transition when we are making plans that are enacted by the Climate Act. And actually, we're currently in the process of preparing a midterm climate action plan, which is a national action plan focusing on various sectors relevant to climate change, and it will be 4 years plan. And when we are selecting different policy tools and policy measures, now when we have this new toolbox, we can also use it in the impact assessment. And especially I think because this is having a focus on these different groups, we will have actually quite concrete help from the toolbox to identify certain questions, for example, in relation to different sectors, but also, for example, the elderly people and youth. And I know that in Finland, when we are going to have the consultation stage, also the stakeholders are taking a lot of standing and giving their views on social acceptability and these kind of things. So I hope that they also will find the toolbox and also use it when they are making their own statements, so that it's not only the policymakers that are taking usage of it, but actually the civil society would also reflect, because they have a different kind of information and point of views. And I think it would be very useful that it will be used in a diverse way by various people. And I could see that there's probably a colleague from Finland who was asking how to get Ministry for Finance to use the box or this toolbox too. So maybe we can invite Nordic Region to have a very special, let's say 45 minutes for the Minister of Finance to identify what are the processes where we could actually apply for that ministry this toolbox too. So I also really much encourage other ministries to take the toolbox, so that it wouldn't be only our ministry taking care of it, but actually I can see that there's at least 8 ministries that could easily benefit out of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Maybe that's a group to identify climate change experts at environment ministries who are frustrated to get through to the finance ministries, where a lot of power is held and a lot of responsibilities. That's a great suggestion to try target finance ministries and finance ministers with this toolbox as well. Thank you so much, Heta-Elina. I move on to Johan Hall. You are representing the Swedish Trade Union Confederation, LO. You organize blue-collar workers across many different sectors in Sweden, in the public sector, as well as in different industries. People working in energy-intensive sectors and on fossil dependent sectors have been identified as one vulnerable group when it comes to climate transition policies. How can you, from a trade union perspective, ensure that the labor market changes that result from these climate policies can promote job security across industries, maybe rather than job losses? What's your perspective, Johan?
Thank you very much. And I must also thank for this excellent toolbox. I think it's very useful and comes handy in many ways. But and also, as I said in this toolbox, I mean, people working in carbon-heavy industries may see jobs disappearing or undergo profound changes in terms of job requirements and tasks. And when it comes to jobs that disappear, it's important to also have a political strategy, both for the workers and the regions that face job losses. I think that a just transition requires a trustworthy vision about a green future with good jobs, and unions and employers must therefore also work with both regional and national politicians to create new jobs in areas where you might face job losses. And I also think that when it comes to workers whose jobs undergo changes, that's a little different because that's easier, I think. That may be jobs where people are manufacturing new products or using new fossil-free processes. So they may not face job losses. They are just challenging a new way of working. And for these workers, I think it's important that they are certain that they will get training or education that's necessary for them to continue to work. And I think there are a lot of things about this that you can find interesting in the toolbox.
Thank you so much, Johan. I think the message here is that you can't avoid some jobs disappearing or getting lost, but what you can make sure is that these jobs are then replaced by green jobs and better jobs, a greener future that is a future also to look forward to. Thank you so much, Johan. Let's move on to you, Petra, for the perspective from a youth representative. What is, you think, most useful with this toolbox when it comes to young people and young people being involved in climate change? What's your perspective, Petra?
Thank you for the question, and thank you so much for the great presentation and the launch of the toolbox. It is really great. I think when it comes to young people, the biggest issue is that young people face a lot of worry and anxiety when it comes to climate issues. And that also is making young people, it's making us appear quite passive when it comes to decision making. We are not being involved as much. So that's why I think when it comes to this toolbox, we have an incredible opportunity to finally have a concrete tool that will allow young people to see, well, young people's voices being heard in the creation of this toolbox, and then also to see what are the different kinds of tools that we can actually use in concrete ways in bringing this sort of climate action into the lives of young people. Because really, as it's stated in the toolbox, young people are the people who will face the most out of these climate actions, because it's our future, and it is incredibly important to also involve young people in these processes, because it will be our future, our lived lives in the future. So I think it is very much so a solution for the sort of lack of opportunities and the lack of resources that are right now in the minds of young people.
So lack of resources and lack of opportunities for young people to raise their voices and being heard with their concerns. I suppose, both about climate change that will affect you as the future generations more than others, but also the effects concretely of climate transition itself. Who can benefit from it? Who will bear the cost? This is extremely important issues. Let's open up the floor for questions to the panelists from those of you who have the privilege to participate live as we launch this toolbox. Do we have any questions from the audience, Louise, that you would like me to forward to the panelists?
They haven't really gotten to the questions yet, I think. So please pop them in the chat. But what about, maybe you have some, or?
Yeah, exactly. Don't be shy if you are in the audience, but also you as a panelist. One of the issues that we are discussing here is this the pressing urgency of climate mitigation efforts itself. Climate change is ongoing. We need to speed up our efforts to stop it. Can I ask you the question? Do we have time to take justice into account? Is there time and resources enough for this? What's your perspective? Hita-Elina wants to make a comment.
Yes, I could start. I think it's necessary to take into account. Otherwise, if the social resistance is going to be very big, we will struggle also to get the policies through. But also, I think that if the policies don't consider practicalities from people's point of view, it can be that we just are unable to enforce them. For example, there might be sectors that are not ready to take up all the measures in a very speedy way, and we might create unintentionally very tight timetables to execute some policies, and find ourselves in a situation where we don't have enough experts, or the sector that is concerned has not been ready and prepared to do those things on time, and then we might be struggling in E-level, for example. And I can see already this, that by making preparations earlier and identify and discuss with all these stakeholders, I think we will make and shape better policies that are more suitable, more efficient, more effective, and also for climate purpose.
So making sure that the transition is just by including people, consulting people, making sure to bring people and different groups on board will make climate transition smoother, will maybe enable it to go faster than otherwise. I sense sometimes that a just transition comes in the way of transition used as an excuse not to transit. People might be saying we cannot move forward with this policy because people will oppose it. People do not want to have more expensive cost to tank their cars, or these issues are sometimes used as an excuse not to move forward. Do you have any position on that, Johan? Are we risking that justice is used as an excuse not to do enough?
I think it can be used as that, but when it comes to the trade union, International Trade Union Confederation, that's not an excuse. That it's rather, when we talk about just transition, we say that we have to have a transition. That's absolutely necessary, but we also think that we won't see a transition if it's not just. That's the thing. So you have to combine them. I remember 4 years ago when there was. More 8 years ago in Marrakesh, I think, when Trump won the election, and we had from the international trade unions talked a lot about just transition. I think there weren't many people talking about just transition at that time, but we were, and we have been doing that for a long period, which is also shown in this toolbox, actually, the story about the just transition concept. But anyway, all of a sudden in Marrakesh, Trump had won the election. He had declared that they were going to get out of the Paris Agreement. There were a lot of people interested in the seminars arranged from the Trade Union Confederation about just transition. And I think that people also started to realize the necessity of a just transition. Of course, we want to make this transition happen as fast as possible, but we also need to realize that we must make it possible for people to have a good economic and social development at the same time, because otherwise they won't accept these changes. So therefore, I think it's necessary to have plans. And still, I think that we're talking about around 2050 to become climate neutral. So we have some time actually, and some apples are hanging lower than other ones. So if we start and have a plan for the hardest one to get, I think we'll make it possible.
Thank you so much, Johan. It's great to see that trade union work has been fruitful and important for the development of the toolbox. Now, let's hope that the toolbox can also be useful for the trade unions moving forward and continuing this relentless working, making sure that the green transition is happening and that it is just. We are coming towards the end of this launch. I need to move on by giving the floor to Anna Lundgren. Anna, you are the project manager and senior research fellow at Nordic Region, and I'd like to invite you to share some key takeaways from this important topic. Anna, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and thank you all that have contributed to this launch of the Nordic Toolbox for a Just Green Transition. I'm very happy to hear all the positive wording about the toolbox and the usefulness of this toolbox. I would like to reach out with a big thank you to the Nordic research team that has done a great job in putting together this toolbox. We have also had a steering group and a reference group that have contributed with valuable comments along the road. We have had the financing from the Nordic Council of Ministers, from the MRSAM and the Nordic Councils for Social Affairs, for Labour Market Affairs and for Regional Development that have supported us in this work. And of course, we have had a very good cooperation with civil society organizations that have provided us with input to this policy proposals toolbox that we are presenting. So representing both elderly, representing youth, from the labor unions, and also for disabled people. So a lot of people have contributed to putting this toolbox together, and we are very happy now to launch it. And I would like to thank you, Lisa, for helping us out with this. Now we had a great presentation from Åsa that talked about the necessity and also encouraged us to share the toolbox. And that is also my final word here, that please go ahead, look into the toolbox, use it and share it with your colleagues. And we will do our best on our side also to share it on our side. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much, Anna. And as Anna said, please now use the toolbox. Get in there, dive in, get back with your feedback. Let's keep improving the toolbox as we use it. I will just want to close by reminding the audience that there are 2 more events coming up in this fall. Is green campaign that Nordregio is running this autumn. There's the Nordregio Forum coming up on the 20th to 21st of November, and there is also a webinar on regional economic effects of the green transition in the Nordic region. So Louise will help us by posting some links in the chat so that you can join these events as well. Thank you so much for joining today. Please share also this launch with people, colleagues, members of your organization who you think should see it. But above all, please share and use the toolbox. Thank you so much.